Good morning. So good to be with you today. Today's a good day. Anybody besides me glad to be alive? Yeah. I think about the goodness of Jesus. I've lived long enough to reflect now, to look over my life and to see the places where life interconnects with the world around me. And at the core of that is relationships. And one of the relationships that is of the utmost importance is your relationship with the Creator, with God. But we can't negate the importance of our relationships with each other. And I think that's where the challenges of life began to emerge. Which brings me to my scripture today. You can keep your seats. Let's pull that scripture up if we can. Let's read it together. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to put confidence in mortals. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to put confidence in princes. You know, for 30 years I have told you to be careful not to worship me. Preachers, pastors, speakers, ministers, it's expedient to be placed in that position of authority, especially at offering time. But the reality is, we have always pointed to God for your ultimate trust. I was talking to a friend earlier this morning, and we were talking about a recent news article on Pastor Dollar in Atlanta. I don't know if you guys saw that article, but my partner said, "Man, Creflo must be retiring." But my title today is From This Day Forward. Let's pull that up. From this day forward, I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to let you go about your business. How's that? Working title was, I'm going to let you make it. When I think about trusting God, I'm reminded that there's an interconnection between how we handle our horizontal relationships and how we manage our vertical relationship with the Creator. Along the way, I was on my way to working on this message this week, and I was working, really listening to my new favorite song, "You Won't Break My Soul." Anybody heard that one? All right? Yeah. And I was jamming on that song. I mean, I was jamming hard. My family can tell you. I was reflecting on who it is I trust and how I trust them, and who trusts me and why they trust me. And in the midst of all of those thoughts around trust, I began to reflect on how relationships are developed. And I brought some pecans just to help everyone visualize this. I decided to use pecans because we all know fruit don't fall from the tree, fall far from the tree, but a nut will just roll. All right, just, all right. And we know that in the context of relationships, relationships are built one act at a time. A smile, a thank you, a call, attend a loved one's funeral of a friend. Take a meal by when a friend is sick. Call a friend just to hang out, to be present. Send a note. Be present when trauma occurs or tragedy strikes. And along the way, we know that relationships every now and then can be impacted by betrayal. And when confidence is challenged. And sometimes rebuilding those relationships can take a lot of work. I was thinking about you this morning as I was preparing, and as I thought about you, I reflected on my 66 years and how many times my trust has been violated. One of my early attorneys, she was a human resources attorney, told me years ago, maybe 28 years ago, she said, "Pastor Rudy, no good deed goes unpunished." But she went on to say, because of our relationship with Jesus, we do the good deed what? Anyway. And I'm reflecting on all of my experiences over this life of mine. And I realized that in the midst of all of these experiences, there's a writer, and that's why I used David this morning. David understood what the nuances of relationships could do to one's life. He wrote often about being betrayed. He wrote often about the power of friendships. He had a friend named Jonathan who respected his position, but Jonathan was also the king's son, a king that was jealous of his best friend. And in the midst of the tension in that relationship, Jonathan always managed to be present to David in the moment David needed his friend the most. This week, as I worked on this message, I also thought about what kind of friend have I been? And how has my friendship impacted positively those in my circle? You know, in a very public life, it is extremely challenging to navigate relationships. I was thinking about the 30,000 people who over the last 30 years have joined this church. Back when we were doing the invitation, you walk down the aisle, 30,000 folk have walked down the aisle in this church over the last 30 years. And I am grateful for every soul that walked forward. Because one day on the steps, 30 years ago, when the steps were right about here, we had a different main entrance. I was standing on the steps one day, and I heard this voice, and the voice said, hey, Rudy, remember, these people do not belong to you. Yeah. That voice, I recognize as the voice of God said, these people belong to me, and so does this church. Great reminder, wasn't it? See, along the way, God, in times when I have needed God, has been present. The interesting thing about my relationship with God is that there has never been a subtraction from God's hand, right? Now God might, in his jar, might have said, well, Rudy, last time you lied, hold on one sec, let me take a few at home. Hold on, last time you cussed. All right. Maybe. Maybe. But for certain, as we think about and reflect on who we trust, I came across this interesting video, and I'm going to suggest you check it out. Dr. Brene Brown has a new video from the, I think, Super Soul Sunday, one of Oprah's broadcasts, where she is talking about braving. And Brene Brown has done this amazing work on vulnerability and shame, and now connecting all of those dots around what it means to brave the context of a relationship. She uses this term braving. The B in braving stands for boundaries, the R, reliability, the A, accountability, the V, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. And when I think about that each of those categories, we're going to talk about them in a moment. The definition she gave for trust from Charles Feltman is a definition that registered with me just in a significant way. And that is, trust is choosing to make something that's important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Something important to me, making that vulnerable to the person I am trusting. Distrust, on the other hand, is what I have shared with you is not safe with you. Now, we're going to have some time to reflect today. Because what happens when we look at trust and betrayal, realizing that there are choices made in a moment when the opportunity to choose is present for either. See, the reality is we all have a choice. And the choice is to trust or betray. And how often do we even betray ourselves in the midst of those human relationships? If we look at the B in braving, the B in braving is boundaries, and boundaries are just that. Those are my psychosocial, interpersonal parameters that as a friend, you know when to cross over those and when not to. But as a friend, I should also know when to cross over those and when not to. Reliability is just that, being consistent with who you are and doing what you said you're going to do. Dr. Brown used a quote by Maya Angelou, and Maya Angelou said, "I don't trust people who say I love you but don't love themselves." And when I thought about that, and I said, yeah. You know, we have used that term here for many years. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I realized early on that was really just a saying. But because it doesn't take long for the truth in the context of a relationship to come to the surface. When I look at this acrostic, this acronym, accountability is just that. Accountability goes both ways in a relationship, and at the core of accountability is a willingness to forgive and to accept forgiveness. Anybody have any struggles with forgiving and accepting forgiveness? The V. And the V is significant primarily because the V is where confidence is held. When we think about this V, as a matter of fact, Dr. Brown says, we use gossip as a way to quickly find intimacy with someone else. So in other words, we feel that if we can secretly talk about others' situations or concerns, then we immediately have a connection with them. But she calls that a counterfeit connection. One of my close friends said, if a dog brings a bone, a dog will take a bone with him. It's nothing but the dog in him. Bow, wow, wow. When I was thinking about this vault, how securely a vault should be held shut, I was thinking about Byron Katie in her book, A Mind at Home with Itself, where she talks about the three areas of business. That's your business, everyone else's business, and then there's God's business. And I think the only one that you have liberty to discuss is God's business. But how often do we betray that trust and share for the sake of immediate intimacy? Almost. Everybody doing all right? The I is integrity. And when I think about integrity, I think about the combination of authenticity, transparency, and consistency coming together in an equation. And when I think about integrity, I think about also saying what you meant to say and being who you really are. Integrity is tested in the moment where you are far from your circle, and acting with integrity as though your circle is present. The N is non-judgment, and non-judgment is just that. About being vulnerable with someone without being judged by them or without judging them. And the G is generosity, and that's generosity in our relationships, in our trusting relationships, and with our words and our intentions. Braving. And anytime we risk the human relationship, we are braving. Anytime we are taking that step, we are braving. So I wanted to, as I come to a close, and I'm reminded of how relationships are empowered. One very clear act at a time. and how over time our relationships are filled with good actions and good memories. And how ultimately we can look at those relationships and know that we have been braving. So, as I close, Zane's going to help me with this. But life is like a passenger train. My dear friend Joe Phillips sent this to Juanita and I last week, and as I thought about it, I said, yes. It's a poem by John Passaro. Life is like a passenger train. And people get on and off at different points for different reasons. And I think about my own experience with trains. My mama used to take me to Herman Park when I was a kid. And I loved to ride the train. I loved it. I love to hear the conductor say, "All aboard!" And I would get trained like I was headed to another country. The one thing I realized from my early experience with a train is that people can get off at any stop and will. But it took me a long time to realize that that wasn't a reflection of me, where people got off. There are some folk who will make the whole trip. And on this picture, you see me right there in the middle? The guy standing next to me, Howard Watson, was the guy I told you about last week, who, when I was headed straight to hell, stopped by one of my businesses often to encourage me, to pray for me, and took me to church. This is our 6th grade graduating class, and I was the salutatorian and he was the valedictorian of our 6th grade class, and we met in kindergarten. And we are still friends today because Howard stayed on the train and made the whole trip. There are some people who will get on at the worst points in your life and ride with you. Did somebody just pop into your mind? At the worst points of your life. And it's a blessing when those folks show up. They're special. I've had a few who have shown up at my absolute worst time, out of nowhere. And I'm grateful. Be wary of people sneaking on at certain spots and certain stops. But don't worry about those who secretly try to get off the train if the ride is getting too bumpy. Don't judge them. Let them go. And if somebody tries to get back on the train, don't be angry. Don't hold a grudge. Because it's something that is happening with them that doesn't have anything to do with you. If they're buckled in, accept them. If they pull the handrail alarm again, just let them off. And remember. And then there'll be times when the train is moving slow. That's me in 1974. And the train was moving slow. In 1974, in that moment, there were a lot of things moving slow. And sometimes, as a matter of fact, there's another, when the train was moving slow. That's me in the shiny Nick shirt. That was right around the time Ron O'Neal and Superfly was doing this thing. And my belly was a little flatter then. But the train was still moving slow. And sometimes the train can speed up. Yeah. And I think back over the last 38 years, and it seems like yesterday. I don't know if you recognize it, but that's Howard standing next to me, my friend from kindergarten. We had just, but that's something I'll tell you about that. There's also a chance that the train will derail. And if it happens, it's going to hurt a lot. Anybody ever experienced a derailed train besides me? Yeah. But because you were braving, challenging literally the construct of human relationships, there are people that will be with you. Matter of fact, that's my friend Howard today. We're hanging out. And for each and every one of us, ultimately our train to get to its ultimate stop. And it's interesting how each of our stops are at different moments. Never at the same time. And when you get to the end of your journey and I get to the end of my journey, what we want to be able to do is look over your life and reflect on how good the journey was. I used to think that life was only a journey and that the destination was up to some magical formula. And I realized ultimately, and I've lived long enough now to know that God knew the destination the whole time. This next slide, one of my friends, dear friend, Pastor Joe Wilson. He got to the end of his journey a couple of years ago. And I tell you the story, I walked into his hospital room his last few days. And he told me to come close. And I did. And Joe, he said, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding, but in all your ways, acknowledge him. He will direct your path. You see, today I know my train has been on a track. And regardless to the stops and the starts, regardless to the derailments, and there have been many in my life, God knew that in one moment I would end up right here talking to you about being brave in the context of your human relationships. So, when you leave this place today, the one responsibility you have is in how you respond to the person in front of you. And that's all you can do. You can't make that person reciprocate. You can't make that person respond in the way you want them to respond. All you can do is trust God and let other people be about their business. God bless you, and God keep you until we meet again. I want you to know how much we appreciate you, how much we love you, and how much we thank God for you. We're gonna wrap up today, but I just thank you for every week for being a part of what God is doing right here on Crawford and Gray in downtown Houston. If you've been with us virtually today, we thank you for joining us every week, and we're grateful for you as well. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And remember that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. God bless you. Make it a great one, y'all. And keep braving. Yeah. Thank y'all.